Hello fear seekers, and welcome to the channel. Spirit boards have long been a subject of great interest to the general public, but that has only become more true as the years have gone by thanks to their regular inclusion in pop culture and paranormal media. Today, we're going to be diving into some disturbing, true Ouija board horror stories. So sit back, put your planchettes away, and get ready to ferment your fears. This story is going to make me sound crazy, but here goes. Before this incident, I had never used a Ouija board in my life. Growing up, I had an aunt who would dabble with Ouija boards and the paranormal, and my mother always advised me to never touch one. One day, my partner decided it would be fun to buy a Ouija board and use it with a few friends. I wouldn't say we were complete skeptics, but I don't think any of us were really expecting anything wild to happen. We went on the internet and looked up how to safely use one and plan out what kind of questions we should ask. So, we run to Toys R Us and pick up a Hasbro Ouija board. We didn't really want to use it at our house, so we gathered up a couple of friends and I drove to a skate park a few towns over. We start to head up the hiking trail and find a good spot to lay the board down. We begin going through the motions of asking if there was a spirit who would like to communicate, etc., etc. The planchette moved with ease. It's a really strange, powerful feeling when it glides across the board. The planchette it came with was a thick hunk of plastic, and there was quite a bit of friction when trying to intentionally move it on the board. We were a bit stunned that the damn thing was working. We asked the spirit if it was a good spirit. Of course, the planchette moved over to no. We then asked if it wanted to harm us. Planchette moves over to yes. My partner asked how it would go about doing this. The board began to spell out E-N-G-I-N-E. We see a group of hikers coming up in our general direction, and we carelessly put the board away without properly saying goodbye. We hike back down to another secluded area and decide to try again. This time, we come into contact with a spirit who claims to be a 6-year-old boy who died sometime in the 1800s. Seemed nice at first, until he told our friend he wanted him to die so he would have someone to play with. We decided to ask the board questions only we would know the answers to. Each person asking the question took their hands off the planchette to be certain. The board got every damn question correct, and that's when I started to feel a bit uneasy. I honestly couldn't believe it. The board then proceeded to spell out my name. I was confused as to what that meant. Soon after, it began to rain, so we told the board that we had to go, and asked it to help us bring the planchette down to goodbye. It complied. We all began walking back to my car when I noticed this woman sitting in an SUV next to mine, watching us. Her gaze never really left, and it kind of rubbed me the wrong way. We all get in my car, and I go to start it, and the engine doesn't turn over. It was almost as if the battery was dead, but my accessories still worked. I began to freak out. I hadn't had my car for very long, and it never gave me trouble. It seemed like way too big of a coincidence. I look over at that woman, and put my window down and ask her if she has jumper cables. She reaches behind her and pulls them out, as if she had them ready. We get out of my car and hook them up, when my partner's friend's phone rings from a number he doesn't recognize. He picks it up, and it was someone just asking if we were okay. He chalked it up to the fact that a drug dealer previously had the number, so he got a lot of unknown calls. Weird. We start chatting with this woman, and thank her for letting us use the jumper cables. Turns out, she has the same name as me, which the board had previously spelled out. Perhaps a warning? She tells us that she works as an ultrasound technician at a local hospital and has cancer in young children. We ask her what she was doing in the parking lot, to which she explained she was waiting for her weed dealer. Medical marijuana is legal in my state, so I was a bit perplexed but didn't think anything of it. I was just grateful she was helping us. I go to try and start the car, and it still doesn't work. It just kind of rolls for a few feet in the parking lot before shutting off. At this point, it's getting dark, and I begin to come to terms with the fact that I'll have to call a tow truck. Our friends ended up getting picked up, and my partner stayed with me as we waited for the tow truck to arrive. We told the woman she could leave, since she was still weirdly waiting with us. She offered for us to sit in her car while we wait, because it was raining again. I asked her if she could pop the trunk so I could sit on the ledge, but she told me the trunk didn't open. So, stupidly, I get in her car with my partner. The weird woman made a joke about disabling her child safety locks in the back, so I won't think she's trying to keep us here. That rubbed me the wrong way. She starts telling me that maybe I should just leave my car there and offered to give us a ride home. I politely decline. Then, she tells me that she has a friend whose husband works for VW, and he could surely fix my car for a good price. She calls up her friend, and because we were in the car, it was quiet enough that my partner and I could faintly hear the other line. She explains the car problem and asks how much it would be to fix it. We hear on the other line the person ask if I am a boy or girl. The woman says girl, and the man on the line simply said, good. Nope. We get out of the car and tell her how the tow truck should be there soon and thanks for her help. We gave her the Ouija board and told her she could keep it because we didn't want it anymore. I still wonder what she did with it. She kept trying to get me to give her my phone number and kept saying she would come with me to get my car fixed from her friend. Eventually, she got the hint and left. We ended up getting back home late. Told the AAA guy how we were messing around with a Ouija board and met the weird lady afterwards. He said he wouldn't have picked us up if he had known that. The next day, my partner opened his texts that he sent out when we were waiting for the tow. In a conversation with his mother, the text box had, "Yes, Satan, yes," written out. The message wasn't sent, but he sure as hell didn't write that. The next day, I called the hospital to see if that woman even worked there, like she had claimed. Nope. They transferred me to 2 different floors, and there was no ultrasound technician working there with my name. To this day, I still don't know how to explain what happened that night, and I'm sure as hell never using a Ouija board again. Also, the dealer the woman claimed to be waiting for never even showed up. So, what she was doing that night, and what her intentions were, I'll never know. This story happened in October of 2004, back when I was still a third-year high school student. My friends and I stuck around the school late at night after our annual Halloween party. We had agreed to try out my friend's Ouija board. It wasn't the brightest idea, but we needed the thrill. We found a nice spot under a huge nara tree and proceeded with our half-thought-out ritual. There were 5 of us, 2 boys and 3 girls. We were all expecting some kind of paranormal contact. Rumor had it our school was haunted, but we've never really experienced anything firsthand, and it was Halloween when all the spirits came out to play. We all wanted to get spooked. Also, we've never seen a Ouija board firsthand before, so we were all pretty excited. Our school was an old Spanish colonial house, built in the 1800s when the Spaniards still occupied the Philippines. We were in a section of the school that doesn't get used often. Located beside a creepy old Jesuit house, people only go there when they need to use the restroom, store equipment on one of the sheds, or make out with their boyfriends or girlfriends. We sat down in the middle of an open space, with only an exposed bare bulb nearby illuminating the surroundings. We were all having a laugh scaring each other with what-if scenarios. It was your typical dumb kids doing dumb things. My friend who brought the Ouija board proceeded to place it in the middle of our circle. If I remember correctly, it was the glow-in-the-dark version, which we found hilarious, but it gave us the ability to see what was written in the dark. Not knowing what to do, and going after what we've seen in movies, we all proceeded to place our index finger on top of the planchette. We sat there looking at each other until one of us said, "What's next?" We didn't know if there was a proper way to start the ritual, plus the board didn't come with instructions, so we decided to just throw in a question. "Is anyone there?" I called out into the darkness. "If there are spirits living here, please talk to us," one of the girls joined in. We clearly had no idea what we were doing. Still, Nothing. Not even the slightest bit of wind. One of my friends jerked the planchette and the girl who brought the Ouija board screamed, breaking the silence. We all laughed at how ridiculous it was. After a bit of joking around, we decided to give it another go. We all placed our index fingers on the planchette once more and asked, "If there's anyone there, we would like to make contact." "Don't break the circle," one of my friends jokingly said. "Shut up," I whispered. We were just about ready to give up when the wind started to pick up. The stillness broke and the darkness around us seemed to move. Just a coincidence, we thought. "Okay, don't break the circle," I yelled out. "Is anyone there?" I was excited. It was like a scene from a movie with dirt and dead leaves swirling around us. "Guys, I'm scared," my friend sitting beside me said. "My mom warned me about playing with forces we don't know." "Did you die here? Were you killed during the war? Are you the headless priest that roams these halls? Do you know Jose Rizal, our national hero?" "Are you a hottie?" my friend giggled. At this point, we were all throwing random, stupid questions. Nothing. "This is nonsense. I don't want to do this anymore," my friend said, exasperated. We were all thinking the same. Just then, a group of dogs from the neighboring house started barking at us through the chain-link fence. These 6 dogs were growling and showing teeth. We all screamed and without finishing the ritual, bolted right out of there. We didn't see each other until after Halloween break, and this is where the story gets creepy. One of the girls told us about a weird experience she had the night after playing with the Ouija board. She had gotten home late after hanging out with her friends from the neighborhood when she realized she forgot the keys to her house. So, she called her brother up, who was then still sharing a room with her, and what he said creeped the hell out of her. He swore she was already home. He claimed to have seen her walk in a while ago, and that she looked really tired and saw her head straight to bed. Creepy, but no need to freak ourselves out, was all we thought. Besides, her brother must have just been tired and seeing things. But then my other friend started telling us about an encounter she had that Halloween night. She was going up to her room when the lights started flickering as she was ascending the staircase. Your typical horror movie visuals. Chalk it up to faulty wiring. But just then, she saw the door to her room open and a dark figure stepped out and stood atop of their staircase. She couldn't make out the entity's face, but she recounted that she couldn't move and felt utter dread as the figure stared down at her. "No way," my best friend who just joined in the conversation said in disbelief. "Something happened to me as well." He recalled that he was sleeping one night when he woke up feeling really uncomfortable. He described his vision as having TV-like static, and a feeling of heaviness surrounded him. He looked around the room, and that's when he saw a bloody, charred face with piercing red eyes grinning at him through the window. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, because I hadn't almost run in with death that night. After the ritual, I was sleeping in our sedan on the way home after fooling around with the Ouija board, when I felt our car jerk. I woke up instantly. Looking out the window, I found out that we'd been hit by a huge oil tanker. I panicked and leaped out of the car. Luckily, my mom and I survived the crash since the front of the car was a total wreck. I still don't have an explanation why those things happened to us, but thank God nothing happened after that. I have never played or gone near a Ouija board ever since. Okay, this is my experience. It's a super long story that happened mainly over a week or so, with a prelude to the whole thing beginning a few months before everything crazy went down. So apologies for the long read. It's worth it though. My friends still often bring it up, and to this day, my hands and feet get clammy just talking about it. My first experience with the Ouija board was at a friend of a friend's house. I was there with my best friend and her boyfriend at the time. My best friend, we'll call her Jessa, had grown up in this house which was notoriously haunted. The women who lived there would wake up with scratches on their backs. They would routinely see the ghost of a little boy. Crazy stuff. all the damn time. Anyway, Jess's childhood friend moved in there when the family moved out. We were there for her housewarming party. Jess's friend had a board. Jessa and I are both pretty spiritual, and neither of us wanted to touch it. Nothing was happening, so Chuck convinced us to do it, saying we were witchy. As soon as we touched it, the cursor started moving. At first it was saying it was a little boy. Jessa and I looked at each other like, oh no, both of us knowing about the little boy in the house. Suddenly, Chuck was like, oh man, did you guys feel that? We all felt it. The air became thick, like hard to breathe. He described exactly what I felt. It was almost like the air was thick fog or mist, but it was still dry. The board started spelling things that I won't repeat here, but needless to say, they were not words you'd ever expect to hear from a little boy. The cursor was moving more rapidly with every word. Finally, Jessa was like, okay, stop. And the pointer stopped, dead in its tracks. It stopped so abruptly that my hand slipped off. When I touched it again, it slowly dragged to the bottom of the board, ending on goodbye. Months later, I was crashing at a friend's place, K&J. They had a basement apartment and I was crashing on their couch. The guys invited over some girls I didn't know and they wanted to try using a Ouija board. I didn't want to touch it, but it wasn't working, so I finally gave in and decided to try it. As soon as I touched it, the pointer started to move. I was touching the pointer with my friend Kay. The cursor was moving really slowly, so as a game I said, move faster, and it started moving quickly. I kept saying, faster, and eventually it was moving so fast, my friend touching the cursor was saying, this isn't funny, as if I was moving it. I said I wasn't moving it, and he freaked out, releasing the board and the pointer went shooting across the room. At that point, we were all pretty convinced it was real. One of the girls wanted to see more, so we grabbed the cursor and started again. So then the board asked to speak to a girl named Haley. The board says, family, father, and proceeds to spell her dad's name. She starts freaking out. The board says it's sorry about her dad, that her dad is a drug addict and her mom's a drunk. It says she has to leave her house because her dad is angry. Haley starts crying and freaking out. The board says goodbye. We get back to the apartment and Haley is crying. She tells us that her dad is a coke dealer and her mom is drunk all the time. Her home life is awful. Her dad would frequently get drunk and coked up and hit her. She was only 16 or 17 at the time. Kay and Jay say she can stay at their place too. Interestingly, months later, Haley's mom dropped her off at the apartment complex and she told Haley that her great-grandfather helped build the place. She said he lived there his whole life and died there. After that night, I started reading about Ouija boards. A couple nights later, I went to visit my best friend and her boyfriend at his place, which was walking distance to my apartment. I told them about the whole thing. He says he wants to try it too. Reluctantly, Jessa and I agree. Keeping in mind, we had all been drinking whiskey. Yes, I know, this is altogether an awful idea. The cursor starts spelling out trees, broken glass. Suddenly, it starts getting violent. Jessa and I tell it to stop and we say goodbye. The cursor drags to goodbye and we put the board away. Suddenly, Chuck is like, oh damn, dude, you're not walking home. He then explains his interpretation of what the board was saying. On my walk to my friend's place, like I said, they lived in a basement apartment, so instead of walking through the halls, we'd just go to the living room window and climb in. To get to the window, I would cut through a back clearing, where there were tall trees all over. He's convinced that there are bad guys in there on that night, and that if I walked home, I would get assaulted. Needless to say, after that visual, I stayed over. The next morning, when I walked through the clearing, there were broken glass bottles all over the place, and my friends said they had heard people drinking out there all night. Anyway, I moved out, and Haley and I became friends. Kay brought the board over as a housewarming gift. One day, my cousin came over to my apartment with her boyfriend at the time. Her boyfriend notices the board in the corner. He asks me about it, and I laugh and tell him the whole story. his eyes get all wide and he asks if we can play with it. Being kind of bored, I agree and we start asking it questions. The pointer starts spelling Jess's name. We all get in the car and head over to her place. She's not home, but Chuck is. I left the board in the car with my cousin and her boyfriend and go to talk to Chuck. He said Jessa was at work until 9 that night, but we could come in and wait for her. After the last incident, he was interested to see what was going to happen. When I got to the car, my cousin and her boyfriend said they heard fingers tapping, as if something were impatiently waiting for me to get back. We sat around waiting for a while, and Chuck brings out his own board, from the last time I was over. We use it, and it says, Jessa, Jessa, and pointing to the no, then to the sun, in the corner of the board. Over and over, no sun, no sun. Eventually, I figured that it was saying no light. I asked if it wanted me to shut off the light, and I said, no, we're not going to do that. I had read that bad spirits do not like the light. Finally, when Jessa got home, she said she was too tired and didn't want to try using it. We agreed to leave it alone and brought the board home. I didn't like having it in my house, so the next time I went to visit Haley at K&J's place, I brought it back. She said she wanted to try it one more time and then we would get rid of it. I agreed. At this point, I was clearly addicted to it for some reason. So, Haley and I are at the basement apartment climbing out the window for cigarettes, near the back clearing with the trees. We go back in and use the board. The board starts spelling out Haley's name, and this time, the spirit says its name is Maria. Haley immediately starts to cry and says, "That's not funny." I had no idea why or what was going on, but the board keeps saying things. It's saying, "Tell them I miss them. Tell them I love them. I'm here. I love them." As Haley is crying, she explains that her best friend's mom, Maria, had died a year ago. I remembered the death. It was big news in our high school. Suddenly, the cursor moved and spelled my name. I asked who it was, and the cursor spelled Deb. I read that bad spirits cannot tell their names because they don't have one. If a spirit can spell a name, that it's usually a good sign. I ask how I know her, and she says she's my spirit guide. Haley says, "How do we know you're real?" And the cursor spells cigarette. And I said, "What do you mean?" And it says window. We look at each other and our hearts sink. I'm like, she knows we smoke outside. I said, "How will we know?" And she said, "Trees." I am like, screw that. And Haley says we have to do it. So, we're smoking outside. I'm looking into the forest, sweating in fear, thinking I'm going to see a damn demon face in the branches or something. Eventually we relax, but then Haley, mid-sentence, her face drops and goes white, and she's like, "Go, go, go! Get inside now!" I toss my cigarette and jump in the window. We close the blinds and we're breathing super heavy. I'm like, what the hell happened? She says that behind me, in the distance, there was a big 100-foot tall tree. There was no wind. I remember this because I was watching my cigarette smoke go directly up, and I was blowing perfect O's without them disappearing. She says the tree was still, then suddenly the whole tree, including the trunk, moved back and forth, then went back to perfectly still. I was like, hell no, and after a while freaking out, sat back at the board. When we put our fingers on it, it said, "Did you see?" We freaked out. It was spelling, "It's okay, I love you. It's okay, don't be scared." Finally, it asked to speak to only me, and for Haley to go away. Haley jokingly said, "Aw, you don't like me?" And the board said, "Don't be sad." This story closes pretty weak because in my mind nothing really came of it. When I tried to use the board on my own, nothing happened. I couldn't move it without the help of Haley, and my spirit guide couldn't communicate with me. I like to think it was real and my spirit guide Deb was just trying to get me off the board. As I said, we had talked about it a lot and were using it quite a bit. I sometimes wonder what Deb wanted to tell me. Anyway, that's it. I haven't touched one to this day, but I do have a slight obsession with making Ouija boards as art. I have been wrestling with the idea of submitting this, A, because it is something that I still feel so scared about, and B, because I am very new to Reddit. After reading some of these stories, I feel compelled to share. It is a little long, but every time I tell this story, the person I'm telling it to, and myself, get chills. When I was younger, I went through a phase of being very into Ouija boards. I was always fascinated by the supernatural and was, quite frankly, disappointed that nothing had ever happened to me. That changed during a sleepover that I attended in 3rd grade. Myself, along with 5 or so other girls from my class, were staying the night at the house of another classmate of ours. Nothing of significance happened until late after her parents had gone to bed. We had played Light as a Feather, Stiff as a Board, and Bloody Mary to no avail, so we had essentially given up on our mission to make contact with the beyond until one of the girls, who was my best friend at the time, smiled and pulled something out of her bag. It was a Ouija board. The host of the sleepover was instantly really upset and demanded that it be taken out of the house. We asked her why she was so mad about it, but she didn't really have a reason. She just insisted that we put it away or else her mom would freak out. Her mom was really religious, so we just assumed that it was a superstitious thing. The girl whose board it was would not accept that as a valid reason to stop, so we started to play. No one except me, the girl who the board belonged to, and the sleepover host really believed. We had asked several questions, and while the pointer did move, they attributed it to me or my best friend moving it. They say that the pointer moves because someone playing is subconsciously moving it. That could have been true, so we decided to ask a question that I knew for sure I only knew the answer to. I intentionally did not put my hand on the piece to try and prove a point, and the piece started moving immediately. It had spelled 3 correct letters when my friend's mom came into the room. I will never forget the expression on her face. It was one of pure terror and absolute disgust. I went to school with this girl and was one of her best friends from ages 5 to 13. I knew her mother very well, and never before then, or since then, have I seen her so profoundly upset. She was so livid that she actually called everyone's parents at 2 a.m. insisting that they come pick us up. Ouija boards usually have some sort of sun, moon, or some other contradicting nature type things in the top corners. The one we played with had an open eye in the left upper corner and a closed eye in the right. When we went back to pack up our stuff, we noticed that it had moved from the letter we had left it on, and it was solidly over the open eye. My friend and I looked at each other and decided it would be best not to share that with anyone else so as not to cause unnecessary panic. When school started on the next Monday, we all ran up to the host asking what the hell had happened and why her mom got so upset. She was visibly shaken and did not want to talk about it. After being goaded all day by everyone who had attended the sleepover, she finally cracked. The story went that when her mom was in high school, she had this group of friends that she hung around with pretty much constantly. 2 members of the group were dating. One day, when they were juniors, they decided to play with the Ouija board. They also decided to ask the one question that you are never supposed to ask. When am I going to die? One by one, they each took turns asking this, and the board gave them all answers. Curiously, the couple both got the same date. For a while, everyone kept the dates in the back of their minds, but as the years went on with no deaths, they lost their impact. The couple stayed together throughout college, and one weekend, the boyfriend took his girlfriend on a trip with the intention of proposing to her. They were both murdered. A murder that has gone unsolved. On the day that the board had predicted they would both die. Now, I have no way of verifying the authenticity of her story, but based on both the reaction of my friend's mom and the manner with which my friend retold the story to us, I have no doubts in my mind that it is true. Now, it has been 15 years since this happened, and nothing has happened in regards to the board resting on the open eye, but I refuse to participate in Ouija boards, and I strongly urge anyone who expresses interest not to as well. Hi guys, I'm glad to see you made it to the end of the video. Ouija boards have always been something that both intrigue and terrify me. With that in mind, I thought I would close off with some important rules before signing off. 1. Never play alone. It's not so the other person can move it to scare you, it's so there is more control over the board, and protection if something goes wrong. 2. Don't play out in the open, especially the graveyard. This leaves way too much ability for anything to get in. While it is not advisable to play in your room or house in general, at least there you know your surroundings and have walls, windows, and doorways you can protect and prepare. 3. It's usually a good idea to have white candles and to say a protection spell or chant before playing. Also consider cleaning the air in the area with a sage smudge stick. 4. Don't be rude. The spirits you contact can become angry and unpredictable. Pretty much just don't be a jerk. 5. Always close off when you are done speaking to the spirit. Never just leave the board or put it away without saying goodbye. You do have to close the connection. If you don't, the spirit can use it to come out, or maybe some other less desirable spirit. 6. This is not always necessary, but it is a good idea. Cleanse the air after you close off the connection and even repeat the protection spell or chant, then put out the candles. Do this especially if you have had a negative experience with the board. Alright guys, that just about wraps up the video. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So long, Fear Seekers. I'll see you in the next video.